Another draft physics video presentation, such. Where did I put my pen? Here it is. Okay, first, a little follow-up on the polarization subject. Part 2, I guess. And then comments, I guess. Not too many. Disappointing, but that's the way it is for now. So where we left off, polarization somehow doesn't absorb entire photons, so you could think about it as being a photon even as conventional physics understands it, even if you make it into some sort of waveton or whatever you want to do, it really does require a certain amount of this stuff. So when they draw it, they don't really talk about the fact that you need more than one of those things to have a thing called a photon. There's a length of it, and they don't even talk about it, but it's an unavoidable implication. Nobody, I don't think there's any physicist who thinks a photon is one little hunk of this stuff and that's a photon. Nobody thinks that, I don't think. Okay, I don't think that's anyone's theory, and they just avoid conversation about the fact that a photon is a ray length. So the idea is, what I realized is, thinking about it some more, is you have this phenomenon of I'll get rid of this for now, that is difficult to explain, frankly, where you have two filters. Okay, you put one this way and you put one this way in light, alright, and it blocks, no light gets through. So you shoot light through, and light, I don't know, that's light. And one portion of the light is blocked by one filter, the other portion is blocked by the other filter, and you get nothing over here, 0. Okay, equals maybe. So and then if you stick a diagonal filter in here, then all of a sudden you get 30% of the light back, something like that. Not all, but you get back a significant portion. And the implication, I would argue, is that somehow this filter fixes, changes the light. That was my argument, essentially, is that each filter is correcting the light in some way, and that this filter is correcting it. Well, anyway, it's a little bit difficult to explain this phenomenon, and even for me, it would be a problem, because my theory was, and it still sticks for radio and other things, that what was making the polarization filter work was the fact that some of these were out of alignment. They weren't perfectly aligned, and so they were in different positions, and certain ones in different positions got knocked out. So, if you erase, this bit, then you no longer have the same frequency in your ray, and so there's no, you can't sit there and say you can detect it as a photon, because it's been broken, and essentially because one of the little quanta has been absorbed. Now, what I have now realized in thinking about this is that a light polarizer is a thin film, and thin films, however you want to look it up, they cause a phase shift. They can, and so depending on the material and how you arrange it, you cause a phase shift. So the idea would be is that a photon goes through something that's going to cause a phase shift, and the phase shift is essentially a result of the fact that the photon is doing something while it's in the material, which is slowing it down. Now, it doesn't actually slow down, it just does more stuff. Okay, it goes more places inside the thin film. So when it comes out, if you had two photons that were exactly the same phase, see, the trick is that radio waves are produced at the same phase. They're all in phase. Every ray of radio is in phase. Where light, the way it generally is produced, the phase of each photon is different. So there's no common phase. But the idea would be is that no one really thinks about phase. They always think about phase as individual photons. Like I could have one photon that's got this phase and one photon that's this phase. So they don't line up. Okay. But it would be separate photons. And no one, as far as I know, has ever considered what would happen if the photon itself had its phase changed. Like this one's phase was changed and this one's phase was changed. That is, it was moved to another location. And this one was moved to another location. That would also break the light in the sense that it's now been, this one was slowed down, so this one is in its position, so to speak, and now it's, they've essentially could be in the same position. But they're not in the same position in the three-dimensional space is the point. So what I'm arguing happens is that we have to understand that the light comes into the thin film polarizer, and what it's really doing is some lines change the phase, some lines don't. So the lines change the phase, the spaces don't change this phase, the line changes the phase, or there's a double phase change. One line doubles the phase change, one line only a single phase change, one line. So the lines in the filter, okay, this one would cause a 2x phase change. This space would only have a 1x phase change. Alternating like that. And so the consequence of that in this theory would be is that when the light, so we're arguing, my argument is that the light is not on a perfect alignment ray. Okay, here's the ray, and some of the quanta is not on that line. And what's happening is those bits are being phase changed. So this one ends up here. And obviously that breaks the frequency. So instead of this frequency, you have this frequency. And obviously you're not going to detect it then. You're certainly not going to detect it as the same form of radiation. And you're certainly can't expect these phase changes to happen in anything but a random order. The irregularity is randomized, so the idea that you could morph the radiation to some other form of radiation is very unlikely that you could detect. It just kind of breaks the frequencies and creates radiation that you can't detect, a photon that's not detectable. And so what's happening is the first filter does some phase shifting of specific, this would be Q1, the first bit of energy. The second one is Q2, and then Q3. And if they're out of this arrangement, this one got phase shifted, and then what's going to happen is when you go through the second filter, it's still going to hit this one again because it's got some orientation in the vertical direction. Let's say the first filter was vertical. This one gets hit again and phase shifts, or this one phase shifts. So essentially all I have to do is phase shift now this one to this one's position. The opposite phase shift essentially. Or they're both equalized in their phase shift. This one got phase shift by the first filter, so the first filter phase shifted this one, and the second filter, F2, phase shifted this one. So now they're back in the right sequence. So in a sense, this is a corrective filter. So the first filter phase shifts some of the quanta. The second filter breaks some of it even more. I mean, it phase shifts this one again and makes it even worse. But it also corrects phase shifts that happen here that screwed things up. So it corrects as much as it destroys, you could argue, in some respects, and gets you back to a position where now you're facing the new filter with at least 75% of your photons in a fixable form still, in a form that can still be a photon. But it's just phase shifting. So And this fits right in with circular polarization, which is essentially, it's kind of demonstrably phase shift. So circular polarization used for like movies, they give you sunglasses, and the glasses, the only difference is these are regular polarizers in this orientation, one way, one with the other way, and then they put another film on this one, a transparency on one of these, okay, and that transparency just creates a phase shift. So that's exactly what's happening, is they're putting the corrective filter on one of these, essentially putting a fixer on one of the sides to cause the phase shift. It might be on both, I'm not sure. No, I think it's just on one. One lens has the fixer on it. And so now they can separate there can be a distinction between the two bands based on the fact that all they have to do is phase shift the film in terms of just have a delay for certain colors, and then or certain portions of the film, and you won't be able to see those photons because they're broken until they get fixed by your fixer. But I don't want to get into details of that. It's kind of complicated, but regardless, I'm just pointing out how circular polarization depends on phase shift, but they think they're phase shifting entire photons. So they think they're taking a whole photon, and here's another photon, and they're phase shifting the entire photons, when no, what they're doing is they're changing the phase based on the polarization. So they're just breaking and fixing photons. So the point is everything I said in the previous video is sort of true, except the photon bits aren't absorbed by the material, okay? They're just changed in their phase. And so that's even more reason why the polarizing film doesn't get warm, is because it's not absorbing the photon's energy. It's just changing the phase of the photon's energy into a different configuration that can't be received as a photon, and then it restores it by putting it through another filter that fixes the phase that was broken by the previous filter. And so it seems to me this pretty much wraps it up. It does explain the phenomenon quite well, provides an explanation. Now the problem is there'd be an easy test for this, because you could just argue, well, are there any microwave experiments, or some other radiation experiment where they can do the three filter, where they can do this filter test, where they just put this in, because if they used a metal filter, you'd say, for radar they use metal bars. There's no way that's causing phase shift. That's, it's absorbing the energy. So but the problem is that the radar is always polarized. You're always creating in phase light, not polarized. I mean, it's always in phase. The photons are always in phase to start with. So it's a little trickier to take these radar photons and put them out of phase. But I've never seen an experiment where they do the three filter trick with radar. The other part is that the radar experiment is the polarization is completely dependent on the orientation of the antenna. So really all they do is, if you change the orientation of the antenna, you have a signal. So if the antennas aren't the same, you get no signal. And if you have the antenna the right way, then you get a signal. So and that's more to do with the polarization. They call that polarization, but it really isn't polarization. It's antenna orientation, which just means it's a straight line force. And obviously if you turn the antenna, you're not going to get all this energy. Most of the energy from the antenna is going to be missed by the receiving antenna if it's not oriented correctly to the antenna. So it's a little more complicated to do the experiment physically with radar, because you're starting with a different kind of radiation that is all in phase. And still think they could do it now to think about it. But well, anyway, so this would prove it, though. If they did this with the metal and put the third filter in with a metal filter, I think that would sort of say, okay, it's got to be something else, because the pieces of metal have to pretty much absorb the radar. You know, they have to absorb the energy. They can't be readmitting it, theoretically. I don't think. I don't think it's possible. But anyway, so that would be a possible proof of what I'm saying. But you can sort of just do it by deduction, in the sense that we do know that the polarizing film for light is most completely, I mean, it's transparent. It's a little dark, but it's transparent. You don't see the lines, and you know, most light will go right through it. 90% of light will go right through it, you know, if it didn't have the lines. What do I want to say? So yeah, so this really is, there aren't metal bars. There's not some opaque substance that's absorbing. You know, the bars aren't made of an opaque substance. They're made of something that transmits light. And the point is it's transmitting it out of phase. So it's taking this and turning it into this. And it's doing that based on alignment. So if the alignment of the photon is off, then only this gets phase shifted, and these remain at their original phase. And that's what breaks the photon. So none of the quanta get absorbed. They just get put out of phase, which is the same thing as being destroyed as something we can receive as a frequency. You can't receive it unless it has the frequency, and it has to have, you know, maybe 4 of these in the same frequency for our receivers to receive it, including our eyes are even less sensitive. They need 6 of these in alignment, or no photon. So you can sort of understand that all you need is 1 of these to be knocked out of phase for this photon to be invisible. And then it's pretty easy to knock it back into phase and make the photon visible again. Yeah, I think it's too good an explanation not to be the right answer. It just fits too well the available evidence. So I'd be interested in any counter arguments, but obviously there won't be any, because there never are any rational ones. So off to the comments, I suppose. I will eventually figure out how to do this more efficiently. Yeah. I should be back, and so to the comments, which are pretty useless, but we'll read them anyway. Hey Gary, did you ever attend college? No. I was going to college, but life got in the way, and I'd already paid my first semester, and blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm not sure what your primary goal is. LSU I was going to. But if it's to solidify and have your model of physics accepted, wouldn't that let's see, if it accepted, wouldn't that fare better in an academic setting? Well, where's your example of that? I mean, where do you see anything in an academic setting where there's any kind of open-mindedness and lots of new ideas rise up out of the academic theater or anything? I mean, Einstein's an example where, you know, he didn't need the academic thing, clearly. It did take him a long time, though. I mean, it took years for people to listen to him, and it took a gimmick, you know, the whole Eddington experiment to get him a New York Times headline. And then all you need is that. All you need is to have some sort of instant credibility. You got something right. And even if you're proven wrong later, it doesn't matter because you're already a celebrity in terms of a go-to guy in the theater of the performance art of whatever you want to call that, academic BS. So I'm just saying, I mean, you're suggesting I go to college. Okay, well, as a student, I won't have any right to speak at all. And they'll, give me a very hard time for being critical. You'll even hear people who had professorships that were in jeopardy, or their doctoral program was in jeopardy because they theorized something elemental that would change something elemental in physics, and they were essentially extorted into not doing that because of the rigidity of the program. So there's every indication that the academic setting is rigid as shit. I guess the problem is I'm suggesting is that the content you're producing is not having as much impact as it could if you were in academia. So again, you're saying that somehow I'd be doing great if I was a student in a college somewhere, where no, the professor would have already failed me or kicked me out of the class, because yes, I would be suggesting, well, isn't there an alternative explanation? I mean, I was even looking up some Einstein stuff that, frankly, there's this whole Weber electrodynamics, and there's a couple other guys who had formulas that already predicted the orbit of Mercury, explained the perigeuum or whatever, and just by applying a speed to gravity, making gravity move the speed of light worked. So I mean, this is this story gets kind of bizarre, and the very fact that those you just really, they're totally closed-minded, these academic people, and they're totally dependent, like the Catholics, the priests and the bishops and the rest of them would be scared to death about some open conversation about the credibility of certain parts of the Bible or something. They're not open to that conversation. All right, with the right people seeing it. Yes, well, by right people, I'm just saying people with a physics degree seem to be totally uninterested in physics so far, right? I mean, that sort of seems apparent that most of the people watching these videos don't have a physics degree. Even the dissident community, I mean, most of them don't have physics degrees. And it just seems like the people with physics degrees, they like doing videos where they mock flat earthers, but they don't seem to want to be challenged on anything a little more, they don't want a more substantial theory than that to challenge them. And they certainly don't go out looking for it to debunk, because they know that they might end up looking like a fool. And they're all fucking cowards. There's no other word for it. Pretty clearly. So I don't know what to tell you. I think this is it's like all celebrity. It seems like bullshit, right? I mean, there's about 10 million people in America, you could argue, that have great singing voices, yet they never have a career. There's so many things. How many actors are only actors because they're damn lucky, right? And you could take Joe Smo off the street. You could have made him into a Tom Cruise or one of these bozos, right? They're not doing anything special. They just have a special privileged position, and that's it. They won a popularity contest once, and that's all you need to do. I mean, all you need is the headline. All you need is the first movie, and you're a star. I mean, it's really that simple. Lucky. You got to be lucky. You got to be lucky that your first movie just happens to be the 10 Commandments or something. All right. Hi. Based on your theory, would you say that the potential electrons, atoms, bits, whatever. Is it that complicated? I call it 2 + 2 + 2 physics, right? There's two kinds of force, plus, minus, whatever you want to call it. There's two kinds of matter bits, plus, minus, protons, electrons. Right? And there's two kinds of interactions, reflection and diversions. There. Is that too fucking complicated? You got to make it sound like whatever this is, whatever you're talking about. No, it's not fucking complicated, shithead. Potential, electrons, atoms, bits. Yeah, they're different fucking things. And the description is kind of obvious. An atom has bits in it. Electrons and protons, douchebag. And the neutrons are a proton and an electron. I've already explained all this. So just fuck you. I mean, it's just such horse shit. But anyway. In the cosmos have always been the same and consistent. Well, I argued sort of that there's a conversion of the force in the sense that there's a certain amount of this stuff, these arrows moving, right? There's a certain amount in the universe. They're rowers. And then there's these things called boats that have some rowers in them, okay? And those are the electrons and the protons. Now, if you kicked all the rowers out of all the boats, just got rid of the boats, then there'd be a certain equal amount of force, I'm arguing. Yes, that's what the universe appears to be, is there was an initial balance, and something is unbalancing it. And that's what I'm arguing is what the boats are basically doing, is because they collect imbalances in rowers, and then they end up moving in directions because they have an imbalance in the rowers in their fucking goddamn boats, and the little boats are moving much slower than the rowers free. So when a rower's free, he's going the speed of light, but when a rower's in a boat, he's going 10 miles an hour. All right. Anyway, and so I've sort of argued that the universe probably goes through stages where the pressure is in the rowers out here in the field, okay, and they're getting consolidated as it would happen because of these force bits. The boats are all collecting, okay, and when the boats get closer and closer together, that means there's more rowers congested in those traps, and so then there's less rowers out here in the free space. And then when you get a whole bunch of rowers in the traps, well, then you have less rowers pushing them, maintaining them. So you're running out of guards, and you have too many prisoners. Then the prisoners escape, okay, and they become guards, and then the guards push the remaining prisoners back in again, so that the universe theoretically could be just oscillating, where the pressure goes from the contraction of matter and then the expansion of matter, and what those would equal would be the movement of the force from the inside to the outside, and then back to the inside and back to the outside. Anyway, great new ones. Do you think the cosmos is expanding? Who the fuck cares? I mean, it's really so far off the goddamn subject. We're talking elemental physics. As I've pointed out before, the big universe is bullshit, okay? Physics is about the only universe that exists, which is the small one. The small one has all the laws and all the rules and everything. The rowers and the boats are all in the small universe. The big universe is just dull and uninteresting, frankly, compared to what's going on in the real universe, the only universe, which is the small universe. Fuck. Alright, is there any debate video between Drafts and Ken? No, Ken was invited politely to interact, and he just mocked me. He told me, I got long hair and it was summer, I wasn't wearing a shirt, and so he just made jokes and laughed. That was the extent of his taking any kind of challenge seriously. And again, I tried a couple other times to make polite requests when he started talking about how he's won every debate he ever had, and he did this and did that. And no, he's never taken up any offer to debate any of his physics. He's a fucking coward. Okay, he won't do response videos to anybody. He won't do anything. He won't interact with anybody who thinks he's full of shit in any kind of constructive way. He's a coward. A screaming, stupid, ignorant coward. His latest video was so dumb. It was like on Gravity. I'll have to play that one because, yes, it's pretty fucking funny. I mean, again, a video, 15 minutes of nothing. I mean, nothing. No information gleaned at all about what he thinks gravity is. Just a bunch of bullshit words about the absence of magnitude, whatever the fuck that means. Things move to places they're not moving to. I mean, it's just he just makes this shit up, and that's all it is. It's just made up, and there's perfectly good experimental evidence that what he's saying can't be true because it's not how the thing goddamn behaves. Fact. Anyway, so that's all we got. Shit. Alright, so really isn't anything happening. Nobody's saying anything reasonable or that anyone reasonable could give a shit about. Bill Gates has just gotten so boring. He just keeps talking about you have to have an object has to have shape, and that's the only thing that can possibly be a something. I mean, just, who cares about this fucking semantic crap? Model has to have pieces. You have to have things, gears. You have to have something in the model. Yes, but I don't really care. You could say the thing in the model is a little sparkly star. I don't care. A piece of invisible glitter. I don't care. As long as it's something, it's described as a something. You label it as a thing, and it has properties. If it doesn't have properties, well, then it's nothing. But that's all. That's all you need to make a model, is to have pieces that have properties. They have functions. Alright, anyway. So, yeah, so it's just nothing. It's just void of anything. Fucking goddamn internet sucks. So, I guess I'll leave it at that. I won't bother playing the Ken video now. I could, but we'll just make it a shorter video and say, I think I've solved the polarization filtering issue. That it really is just about, the phase shift is just as effective in breaking a photon, the inside of one photon. Phase shifting the bits inside the photon is just as effective as wiping them out, absorbing them, in terms of making the photon unreceivable as a visible photon. Alright, so till the next time, and such, so forth and whatnot. I mean, I can only supply you with the right answers. You being able to recognize the right answer, I can't make you recognize right answers, but these are right answers. Jesus. Giving you every possible cheat to win, to pass the test. And you're too stupid to accept. You just keep wanting to go with the dumb suggestion, the phantasmagorical, wooey, fairy, vacuous mush of bent space and virtual photons. Ironically, virtual photons. Ironic in the sense that they're conceding it's behaving just like a photon, and yet they won't call it one, because they can't account for its existence, because they don't understand any of this fundamental stuff. Anyway, till the next time. Yeah, I guess I'm going.